Kivalina in Alaska. And then when I say Alaska, we're talking North Slope, Alaska. Does that have a little laser beam? No. Way at the top of Alaska, the North Slope of Alaska. Incredibly cold and remote area. This village is located not down the road from Publix. It's located 50 miles away from the nearest road of any kind. So very, very remote. A native village, native Alaskan village of 400 residents. They've lived in this area for generations, and you might be thinking, well, that was foolish of them to go live on that narrow strip of land. That's not what happened. Climate change did this. Sea level rise and coastal erosion, this narrow strip of land used to be much wider decades ago. So you've got a strip of land that's surrounded by water on both sides, and this process of sea level rise and coastal erosion over decades with what we're seeing with global climate change has accelerated the loss of their coastline, and now they are literally on the brink of going underwater. The experts, scientists and engineers have projected they've got maybe 10 to 20 years left to live on this strip of land. So, if you were this village, who would you blame for that? Well, let me first put it this way. The cost to relocate these 400 people, this is estimated by, mind you, a US government agency, not a swanky consultancy firm, $400 million. So 400 people, 400 million. So clearly they don't have that kind of money to relocate the entire population and all its infrastructure 10 miles inland, also in cold, remote northern slope, Alaska. They don't have that money. If you were their lawyer, who would you sue to get that money? They didn't cause that coastal erosion. They're victims. They're basically carbon neutral in their native Alaska lifestyle. And yet they're about to face an untimely death if this money is not put together for them. And they're clearly not going to be able to do it themselves by holding out a can outside of public. So who should they go after to foot this bill?
U.S. government.
U.S. government, that's a good choice. And we're going to talk more about how much the U.S. government might be willing to do. Not as much as you would hope or think. So who else might you sue in your strategizing session, in your round table of environmental lawyers representing this native village? Yes?
Any CO2 emitters.
Wow, that's a broad set, isn't it? I'm a CO2 emitter, I'm talking. So are you going to narrow that in any way?
Sure, the ones that have the deepest pockets.
Okay, now you're onto something. Yeah, I mean, this is what environmental law strategizing is about. Some of the best environmental lawyers in the country have this very conversation. And who did they go after in this lawsuit? Not the federal government, not the state government of Alaska. They went up against the 24 largest multinational oil and gas companies in the world. And you know who's on that list. BP, ExxonMobil, Shell, you know. So, if you're an attorney for one of those multinational corporations, collectively, those 24 multinationals are responsible for 20% of the carbon dioxide emissions worldwide. Collectively, they are far exceeding nations' annual emissions. So, if you're a lawyer for that group of defendants, what's your argument to say you can't hold us accountable for that problem in Kivalina, Alaska?
That you can't prove causation?
Yeah, causation is the real problem here. And causation has two dimensions to it. We'll get to that in a moment. But causation is daunting in the sense that science, as we've learned from our scientist in the room to my left, the science tells us there is no way to identify the emissions from ExxonMobil caused that sea level rise in Alaska. We're incapable of making that link scientifically. We can certainly say that ExxonMobil's emissions have caused global climate change to increase by a certain percentage, and they were somehow a percentage responsible for this global climate change. But we can't say they caused that sea level rise to that population and that coastal erosion. The other argument they have, which is a pretty good one, is they didn't break the law by doing what they did. We don't have any climate change regulations in the US, and don't be proud of that. So the reality is that these multinational corporations have been able to go on with business as usual for decades now, really since we started talking about climate regulation, 1992. We have not had climate change regulation on these multinational companies, so they continue to do what they do, make the global climate change problem worse, and they're not breaking the law by doing it. So that's a valid defense. That's known as a permit shield defense. Basically, I mean, you essentially had permission to do what you were doing. You weren't prohibited from doing it, and so why would someone sue you just because that happened to cause a problem? The law didn't prevent you from doing that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you're